Well, this is a weird video to start my channel on, considering I wanted this channel to be speed paints and art rambles, but what can we do? We're going to start with a D&D session diary campaign. Just for clarification, I am nowhere near what anyone would consider a professional D&D. This diary is from my first D&D campaign that I am proud of, and that has more than, well, one player. This time I have 2 players. And if anyone is wondering, this is a homebrew world, with homebrew mostly everything, other than the basics of the PHB and DMG, so let's get into this video. The characters start in a Dwarven-run train, heading south from the northern Elven Council city to an unfamiliar city, named Elder Point. The train drove fast down the tracks, across the desolate dried-up shrubland of the northern canyon. The fog clinged to the ground in the train, making it hard to see anything out in the wasteland. Our players, being mistaken for adventurers or heroes of the kin, were led into the highest class passenger cart, mostly known for housing, well, adventurers and heroes. The characters spent their morning on the 7th day of the 8th day trip of the train, drinking, smoking, and eating some unknown jerky. As they enjoyed their lone, quiet day, Clayton, a half-wood elf gunslinger, had received an unknown letter that slid under his door, from an unknown place and unknown person in Elvish script. Sadly, I cannot tell you fine watchers what the letter said, cause it has yet to be told to the other player character. Not long after the message arrived, they heard the running of a herd of bird-like creatures, with their long feet ripping up the ground. Soon after hearing that, thuds on the side of the train occurred. Both of them knew that this was a raid attack. Yet, looking outside, they could not see anything of their attackers. Clayton readied for someone to burst through the cabin window or to rip the sliding door open, while the other half-wood elf gunslinger, Harlan, cowered on the floor of his cabin. They both heard war cries from an unknown language. Some words and phrases sounded familiar, yet neither of them could pinpoint the word or phrase from the language that was spoken. They both waited. Soon they heard the conductor, an old dwarf with a shotgun, running into the passenger cart and ringing a bell, seeming like some sort of signal, yet neither of the players knew what it meant. The dwarf ran to the closest fire escape and climbed to the roof of the train cart. Not long after that, the crashings of windows from all across the train could be heard, and one right across from Harlan's cabin. And, in true chaotic neutral fashion, neither of them did anything. The door of the broken-in cabin was ripped open violently. Harlan could see through the stained glass in the shadow. The creature was a desert goblin. The little humanoid was wearing a necklace of multicolored feathers, and red war paint covered his arms and face. Not noticing anyone in the near vicinity, the goblin used his javelin to knock down the lantern in the hall, catching the place on fire, and leaving to the next passenger cart. This causes the 2 gunslingers to flee the cart. Clayton climbs up to the roof of the cart, where he meets the conductor up there, shooting more goblins with his shotgun, while Harlan runs off after the goblin that set the cart on fire, where he is greeted to what could only be described as the leader of the raiding band, a buff-looking goblin with a shoddy pistol, and 1 other henchman. The goblin that set the cart on fire was standing to the side of the door as the boss held his pistol at Harlan. On the rooftop, Clayton walked over to the dwarf and asked, "Need any help?" "Nope. This happens almost every trip," the dwarf replied. The goblins had enough of this banter and attacked, wounding the dwarf and barely missing Clayton with their erratic javelin strikes. Clayton also had enough of this, and walked up to one of the goblins, aimed his pistol right at the goblin's head, and shoots. The other 2 goblins on the roof just stared at the masked gunslinger in terror. Right before the other goblins could do anything, the dwarf lifts his shotgun and shoots. The spread takes them out, no problem. The 2 gunmen both make their way to the other passenger cart, where more commotion is happening. In the meantime, Harlan was able to befriend the pyro goblin in the corner, who seemed to speak very broken common, but was able to communicate that he just needed some food. However, when Harlan was doing that, one of the henchmen of the boss had taken a halfling hostage and had the tip of its javelin at the hostage's throat. Clayton asked the goblin boss what he wanted from the train. "You took our land. Give it back." The goblin boss then shoots a dwarf passenger, instantly killing them. With a scowl, Clayton lifts his rifle and shoots the boss goblin. The bullet rips the boss's arm clean off. In pain, the goblin falls to the ground. Clayton, without hesitation, walks over to the wounded one, pulls down his mask to reveal his shagging skin from leprosy, almost making him look like a living undead. The goblin spoke one phrase in common: "To escape." Clayton looked over to the hostage situation. The other goblin, scared to the bone. The goblin did the first thing he could think of. It ran with the hostage and jumped off the train. Clayton tied up the boss, but the conductor of the train promptly takes it and throws him off the train into the hot wasteland outside. Since Harlan gave the pyro goblin some food, trades some rum with the little guy, and let the goblin sleep in his cabin, I think we have a new member of the party. The desert goblin introduced himself as Hog-Urk, and now follows Harlan around places, as more of a slightly more intelligent pilot, and carries around a very weak weapon with very shoddy quality. The two players, still unacquainted, spent the rest of the train ride drinking before going to bed, before they have to pack in the morning to get off the train. Once there, the town was oddly filled with many guards at the train station as people get off. Without much thought of it, the two of them got a room for the night and more smokes before heading off to the saloon for more drinks. While on the train, Harlan had got a date with a dwarf, whom he was supposed to meet at the saloon that night. The introduction didn't go so well, but they did end up playing a card game with less than meaningful chatting. While Clayton thought it was a good idea to start a bar fight with somebody, he walked up to the strongest person he could see in the bar, which happened to be a 7'1" human monk. And surprisingly, he had successfully made the entire bar go into a fight, including having the barkeeper throw one of his very low-costing wines into the chaos. The two people then left without much thought.